The text came through at 11:47 p.m., but Lucas Carver was already awake. He hadn't really slept since Tuesday, not deeply. Sleep didn't come easily in that house anymore. The walls were too quiet, the air too still. The sprawling estate outside Asheville had been designed for peace, for escape. High ceilings, glass, everywhere the mountains visible from every angle. Most people would call it paradise. Lucas called it a container. He stood barefoot in his kitchen, nursing a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. The phone buzzed on the marble counter screen, lighting up with a single line. "Ben, I'm sorry to ask again. I just need $50 for formula. Micah's almost out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back. Please." He frowned, reading it again. It didn't fit the usual profile. No links, no scammy emojis, just words. Raw, vulnerable, misspelled in a way that felt honest. He tapped the message, checked the number. Not saved. Not familiar. He should have ignored it. He normally would. Instead, Lucas set the mug down, leaned back against the counter, and stared out the window where rain had started tracing lines down the glass. He read the text again. And again. Across town, in a crumbling second-floor apartment above a boarded-up barber shop. Delia Monroe stared at her dark screen and waited. It was cold. Not snow on the ground cold, but cold enough that she could see her breath if she stood near the window. The space heater had given out last week. Her sister offered to help, but Jenna was already covering their mom's prescriptions. Delia couldn't ask again. Pride was a tightrope, and she was running out of rope. Micah whimpered from the corner tucked into his sleep sack and rocking gently in the donated bassinet Delia had patched with duct tape. He'd cried himself into hiccups earlier. There was one bottle left, mostly water, half a scoop of formula she'd scraped from the bottom of the canister. "Shh," she whispered, holding herself still, arms wrapped around her knees. The message had been sent 5 minutes ago. To the wrong number, she realized too late. She'd meant to text her brother, but she'd been rushing, one hand holding Micah, the other barely steady enough to type. She didn't check it. Now she didn't dare pick up the phone again. The silence felt like judgment. And then buzz. Delia jumped. She grabbed the phone off the floor. "One new message. I think you meant to send that to someone else." Her chest collapsed inward. Heat flooded her face. "God." She typed quickly, fingers shaking. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please ignore. Wrong number." She hit send, locked the screen, buried her face in her knees. The kind of embarrassment that sits in your stomach for hours, even when it's over. But it wasn't over. Buzz. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Delia blinked. The words stared back at her. That wasn't a normal reply. That wasn't someone mocking her. That was concern. She stared at it, read it again. Her instinct screamed to block the number. "Don't engage, don't hope." Instead, she answered, "We'll manage. Sorry again. Didn't mean to bother you." There was a long pause. Micah coughed softly in his sleep. "Buzz. I can help." "No strings." Delia let out a laugh. Dry bitter. "Sure you can." "Thanks," she replied. "But I don't take money from strangers." "Buzz. Smart policy. I'm Lucas. Not a stranger anymore." She didn't answer. She pulled the blanket tighter, rocked in place. Micah made a soft sound, half a sigh. Delia looked over at the formula canister. Still empty. Something in her cracked. Something quiet. She opened Venmo. Typed in her handle. Hesitated. Then sent it. 3 seconds later, ping. She stared. $5,000 received from Lucas Carver. Delia froze. No. She opened the app again. Refreshed. Checked the transaction. Still there. $5,000. Her throat burned. Not with joy. With something heavier. She'd been numb so long she forgot what overwhelmed felt like. She typed, "This is too much. I only needed $50. The reply came fast. "It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about." Delia didn't cry when she lost her job at the diagnostics clinic. She didn't cry when her car died and she had to sell it for parts. She didn't cry when Micah's father ghosted her 2 weeks after the baby shower. But this broke something open. She pressed her hand over her mouth and shook silently. "Buzz, you don't have to say anything. Just take care of Micah." Delia stared. She never mentioned her son's name. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. But for once, she didn't type. She just sat there as the radiator clicked and Micah breathed, and the apartment her life remained exactly the same, and completely different. Across town, Lucas stood in his glass kitchen, still barefoot, still holding that cold coffee. His phone screen glowed. $5,000. Sent. No second thoughts. He closed the app and whispered into the empty kitchen, "I know what it's like to go without." His voice sounded strange in the quiet. And maybe for the first time in months, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Not yet. But almost. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1. To let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Delia didn't sleep that night. Not because of the money or the shock or even the mystery of who Lucas really was, but because her mind wouldn't stop racing. She sat cross-legged on the worn rug in her living room, watching Micah sleep in the soft glow of the open fridge. The heat had finally clicked on again, and the apartment felt less like survival and more like something close to comfort. $5,000. She kept checking the app. It hadn't disappeared. No requests, no demands, just there. The message, too. Just take care of Micah. Who was this man? She hadn't asked for more, hadn't told him where she lived, hadn't begged or played the victim. She'd been honest, brief, embarrassed, and somehow that earned her grace. That's what it felt like. Not charity, not pity. Grace. The next morning, Jenna showed up unannounced. Delia cracked the door open, hoodie zipped to her chin, hair a mess. "Wow," Jenna said, stepping inside. "It smells like soap and—" "Is that lavender?" Delia nodded slowly. "I cleaned a lot." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "Yeah. No, like, you okay, because last week you were rationing wipes." Delia hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. Then she told her. Everything. The wrong text, the reply, the money, the name, Lucas. By the time she was done, Jenna stood in the kitchen holding an empty coffee mug like it was a grenade. "Delia, you cannot just accept thousands of dollars from a stranger. I didn't ask him for thousands." "But you took it." "I needed it. That doesn't make it safe." Delia looked up. "He hasn't asked for anything. He doesn't even know where I live." "You sure about that?" Jenna pressed. "Because if he knows Micah's name without you telling him," "Delia, come on." Silence filled the room. Micah stirred in his bassinet, eyes fluttering. Delia crossed to him, gently rubbing his back until he settled. Then she exhaled. "I Googled him this morning." Jenna folded her arms. "And Lucas Carver. Carver Health Systems. Based here. Billionaire. Of course he is." Delia smiled, just barely. "The wrong number belongs to one of the richest, most private men in the state." Jenna paced once, then sat. "What does he want? I don't know." Jenna studied her. "And what do you want?" Delia looked at her sister for a long time. "To breathe," she said. "Just for a minute." Later that day, as Micah napped and the dishes air-dried on the rack, Delia's phone buzzed. "Lucas, did the supplies arrive yet?" Her heart skipped. "Delia, what supplies, Lucas?" "The ones I sent this morning." A knock sounded at the door. Delia froze. Micah stayed asleep. Another knock. She tiptoed to the peephole. A delivery van. The driver held 3 large boxes. She opened the door slowly. Delivery for Delia Monroe. She nodded. The man set the boxes down, asked for a quick signature, and left without ceremony. Inside were diapers, wipes, formula bottles, a new sleep sack for Micah, organic baby food she'd only ever seen in Instagram reels, and a soft toy fox with a tag that said, "For Micah." At the bottom of the last box was a plain white envelope. She opened it. One sentence he should never have to go without again. Eldelia stared at the handwriting. Neat, sharp, clean. She sat on the floor, one hand on Micah's bassinet, the other holding the envelope. She typed. "Delia, why are you doing this, really?" A minute passed. Then, "Lucas. Because I can. And because someone once did something for me that they didn't have to. I never forgot." She read the message 5 times, then typed. "Delia, I don't want to be a story you feel good about. I'm not a rescue project. Lucas, I know. You're a mother. Who fought? Who's still fighting?" Delia didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called her that. Not like it was a compliment. She looked at Micah, still asleep with the fox toy tucked beside him. "Lucas, I won't message again unless you want me to. Just know the door's open. For whatever you need." Delia stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered, then tapped. "Delia, what's the door lead to?" This time the response came slower. "Lucas Coffee. Conversation. Nothing you don't choose. I believe in choice." She smiled. Not wide, not full, but real. She hadn't smiled like that in weeks. She typed one more message. "Delia, maybe." Lucas didn't reply right away. But when he did, it wasn't a message. It was a photo. A mug. Black ceramic. Sitting on a counter that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Rain on the window behind it. The caption read, "I'll be here." And somehow that didn't feel like pressure. It felt like permission. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It tapped against Delia's bedroom window like it had nowhere else to be, blurring the outside world into shapes she didn't need to name. Inside, things were still. Calm in a way that made her anxious. She wasn't used to still. Micah was finally sleeping through most of the night. The fridge was full. She didn't have to cut formula with water. She didn't have to fold towels until her fingers went raw at the laundromat. Not this week anyway. But the quiet had asked questions she didn't want to answer. Every time she picked up her phone, her chest tightened. Maybe he'd messaged. Maybe he hadn't. She'd told him, maybe. And then said nothing else. She wasn't sure if she was being cautious or scared. Maybe both. On the 3rd morning, Jenna called. Still breathing, Delia huffed. "Barely. I think I forgot how to live without crisis. That's not funny. It wasn't supposed to be." There was a pause. Then Jenna's voice softened. "Want to come over tonight? I made that lasagna you used to inhale during finals week. I don't want to eat your entire fridge. You're not that powerful." Jenna laughed. "And besides, I miss Micah. And you look pale over text." Delia smiled. "Fine. 6-6. Delia dressed Micah in a clean onesie, packed up a diaper bag with more than enough, and stared at herself in the mirror before leaving. She looked normal. That alone felt unreal. Jenna's apartment was brighter, warmer. She lived across town in a duplex with good windows and clean baseboards. Not luxury, but safe, full of lived-in comfort. Micah cooed at the sight of his aunt arms reaching before she even finished her sentence. Traitor, Delia teased, as Jenna scooped him up. "I'm prettier," Jenna said, swaying gently. "He knows it." The night stretched easy, lasagna-warm tea, a movie in the background they barely watched. Delia sat curled into the corner of the couch, eyes flicking to her phone every few minutes like she was waiting for something she wouldn't admit. Jenna noticed. Of course she did. so she said, peeling at the label of her water bottle. Have you talked to him again? Delia hesitated. Lucas Jenna pressed. No, not since the photo. Jenna looked up. The mug one, Delia nodded. Jenna exhaled. He's either deeply thoughtful or incredibly manipulative. Delia gave her a look. I'm serious, Jenna said. Men don't just be like that. Not without motives. Maybe he's different. Maybe you want him to be. Delia didn't answer. Because that part hit too close. At home, later that night, with Micah finally down, and the rain slowing to a drizzle, Delia curled up on the couch and opened her phone. The photo was still there. I'll be here. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed. Delia, what kind of coffee? 3 dots blinked into life, then stopped, then started again. Lucas French Press. Dark roast. I grind it fresh every morning. It's a habit. Or a ritual, depending on how tired I am. She smiled, imagining his voice. She'd never heard it, but somehow she could. Calm. Slow. The kind of tone people listened to without realizing they were leaning in. Delia. You said conversation. What would we even talk about, Lucas? That depends. What don't you let yourself say out loud? Her breath caught. Delia. That's not small talk. Lucas. I don't like small talk. The conversation paused, long enough for Delia to start questioning herself again. Then Lucas. Come to the building. Tomorrow. Noon. No expectations? There's a cafe in the lobby. You won't even have to see me if you don't want to. She stared at the message. No pressure, no manipulation, no promises. Just a door. One she could walk through or walk past. She didn't reply. Not right away. She lay on the couch for almost an hour, heart thudding, mind spinning. Micah stirred once. She went to him, rubbed his back, hummed the lullaby her mom used to sing when life was a little simpler. When she came back, the phone was still waiting in her hand. She typed, Delia Noon. Sent it, turned the screen over, and let herself feel nervous for the first time in a long time. Not about surviving, but about being seen. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Delia stood in front of the glass tower, heart pounding harder than it had in months. Carver Health Systems didn't look like a place someone like her belonged. It shimmered with quiet power, steel glass, brushed concrete, everything polished and expensive, but not loud, like money that didn't need to introduce itself. Micah was at Jenna's for the afternoon. She'd kissed his forehead twice before leaving, then turned around at the bus stop like she'd forgotten something. She hadn't. She just couldn't make her feet move. But now she was here, 32 minutes early, and already debating walking away. No one knew her here. No one would notice if she turned and left. She could tell Lucas something came up. She could blame Micah, or the weather, or anxiety. But something about that idea that he wouldn't be surprised if she bailed made her stomach twist. She hadn't dressed up. Didn't have the means to. Just a clean sweater, jeans, and boots with soles that didn't leak. She'd borrowed Jenna's wool coat, hoping it looked neutral enough to blend. Inside the lobby stretched wide and open, a security desk to the left, a cafe tucked behind a wall of living plants to the right. The ceilings soared, the floors gleamed, and everyone moved like they had somewhere to be. No one looked like they were here by accident. Delia stepped inside, clutching the strap of her bag tighter. Her palms were sweating. Hi there, a soft voice greeted. She turned. A woman stood behind the cafe counter, maybe early 40s, sharp eyes, but a warm smile. You look like you could use something hot. Delia blinked. That obvious? I've worked this lobby 10 years, the woman said. I know a first-time visitor when I see one. Delia stepped forward. Just coffee. Whatever's strong. You got it. As the woman turned to brew it, Delia glanced toward the elevators. She hadn't told Lucas she'd actually come. No confirmation. Just noon. And then nothing. Maybe he wasn't even here. Maybe this was all some elaborate way to get her out of her apartment and into a public space where he could decide whether she was safe to keep helping. The coffee arrived in a black ceramic cup. Not a to-go cup. A real one. Delia smiled faintly. He'd said he liked mugs. She took a sip. Hot. Bold. Not bitter. She sat at a table in the far corner back to the wall facing the entrance. The minutes ticked by. At exactly 12:03, a shadow shifted in the glass reflection. She glanced up. And there he was. Lucas Carver didn't look like a billionaire. No tailored suit, no entourage, just dark jeans, a slate-gray sweater coat folded over one arm. He was taller than she expected, and paler like the sun hadn't touched his skin in weeks. But what struck her most, what rooted her to the chair, was that he looked exactly like she imagined. Composed, but tired. Like someone who hadn't had a real conversation in a long time. He didn't approach right away. He paused. Then gave her the smallest nod, like asking for permission to come closer. She nodded once. Lucas walked over slowly, pulled out the chair across from her and sat. A beat passed, then another. He didn't speak first. So she did. You're real. His lips quirked. So are you. She studied him. You look ordinary. I hear that a lot. I don't mean it as an insult. I don't take it as one. They sat in silence again. Delia wrapped both hands around her cup. I wasn't going to come, she said. I know, but I didn't want to keep wondering. That's why I left the door open, he said softly. So you could choose? She looked at him, trying to read past the calm. There was something else behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or loneliness carved into shape. Why me? She asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. Because your message wasn't about money, he said. It was about Micah. Delia's throat tightened. I get a lot of requests, through other channels, people wanting handouts, investments, publicity. But yours, it wasn't written like a plea. It read like a mother trying to keep her son from going hungry. I was, she said. I know. Another pause. Then she asked the thing that had haunted her most. Why did you send so much you didn't have to? No, he said. I didn't. She waited. He looked down at his hands clasped together on the table. I had a sister, he said quietly. Younger. She had a little boy. I used to help when I could. But I wasn't around enough. Not when it mattered. Delia watched him carefully. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. What happened? She got sick, fast. I wasn't there. I was building this. He gestured around. Too busy, too focused. He looked up. Met her eyes. Micah reminded me of him, and your message reminded me of her. It wasn't just about formula, it was about dignity. Delia blinked hard. Is that why you keep reaching out? Guilt? He shook his head once. No, I don't feel guilty for helping you. I feel responsible. For me. For opening a door. And making sure no one slams it in your face. She sat back, uncertain. That's a big door. I can open it, he said. But you decide if you walk through. A long silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but weighty. Finally, Delia said, What are you offering? Lucas smiled, but not like he was trying to sell her something. Coffee, he said. Conversation. And maybe something more later, if it makes sense, if it's mutual. And if I say no, then I respect that. Always. She believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. Delia took a slow breath, then lifted her cup to her lips. The coffee had cooled, but her chest felt warmer than it had in weeks. "You said you like rituals," she murmured. "Is this one? Maybe," he said. "Want to make it one?" She smiled. "Not a maybe this time. Just, yeah, maybe I do." 3 days passed before Delia heard from him again. Not a text, not a call, just a knock. She opened her apartment door slowly, half expecting Jenna, maybe the neighbor, asking for a borrowed charger again. But instead, on the worn welcome mat outside her door, sat a cardboard box. No label, just her name written in clean, narrow handwriting, one she now recognized. She glanced down the hallway. Empty. Micah babbled from inside, happy in the way only babies who have no idea what rent is can be. Delia brought the box in, set it on the table, and opened the lid. Inside a laptop. New, slim, silver. No note. Just a sticky tab on the screen that read, "Let me know if you're curious." Delia stared at it like it might explode. Then, carefully, she sat. Micah kicked his feet against the playmat, gurgling. She smiled at him absently, then powered the laptop on. A single folder on the desktop, Carver Temp Project. She hesitated, then clicked. Inside documents, spreadsheets, vendor logs, timestamps, codes that didn't make sense, and a file labeled Welcome. She opened it. A video loaded. Lucas sat behind a desk in what looked like a small office. The lighting was soft, nothing flashy. He wore a black shirt sleeves rolled up. No tie, no production, just him. "Hi, Delia," he said, voice low and even. "You don't have to open this, but if you do, it means I've taken a chance. A small one." He leaned forward slightly. "There's something I want you to consider. Not a job offer, not yet. Just curiosity." He tapped a folder. "These are vendor records from the wellness division. They've been flagged, but nothing conclusive. My team's overloaded. I need fresh eyes. Someone who isn't looking through the same lens as everyone else." He paused. "I remember you said you worked diagnostics. That takes precision, detail, patience. All rare." Delia froze. She hadn't told him that. "I asked Marcia to run a basic background," he added gently, like he'd read her mind. "Nothing invasive, just what's public, where you've worked, what you've studied." He paused. "If that overstepped, I apologize. But I believe in trust being earned both ways. And I wanted you to know, I see your potential, not your hardship." The video ended. Delia sat in silence, the screen dimming slightly as it waited for her to act. She didn't move. Her stomach turned over heavy with something she couldn't name. Trust, fear, hope. Maybe all of them. She closed the laptop gently, then picked up her phone. Delia. That was a bold move. The reply came a minute later. "Lucas, I'd apologize, but I'm not sorry. Delia. You want me to dig into your company's files. Lucas, I want you to look. See what you see. Nothing more." She stared at the message, then typed, "Delia. You trust people easily. Lucas, no, just quickly when it feels right." She swallowed, then typed again. "Delia. You might be disappointed. Lucas, I've already seen proof you don't give up easily. That's enough for me." She exhaled. Not a breath of relief, a release of something tighter. The next day, Delia opened the files again. She worked slowly, nap-time hours, only earbuds in squinting at vendor names and cross-checking invoice dates. At first it was just noise, numbers. But on day 3 she noticed something. 2 vendors, different names, same billing address. She flagged it, then kept digging. By the end of the week she'd found 3 more, each one just small enough to fly under the radar. Overlapping by days, each approved by the same internal contact. She didn't understand the full picture yet, but she felt it in her gut, the same gut that used to catch lab errors before they hurt someone. Something wasn't right. She texted him again. "Delia, got time for coffee? I've got questions." The reply came immediately. "Lucas always. My office. Tomorrow noon. Delia, I don't have a badge. Lucas, tell reception you're expected. I'll handle the rest." The next morning, Jenna raised an eyebrow when Delia dropped Micah off. "Coffee again?" she asked. Delia tried to smile. "It's kind of a weird situation." "You're glowing weird," Jenna said. "Be careful, I always am." But as she stepped into the elevator the next day, ascending floors she'd never imagined stepping foot on, Delia realized she didn't feel careful. She felt alive. Lucas was waiting by the elevator, not behind a desk, not hiding behind money or security or distance. Just there. Waiting. "Hi," he said. "Hi. You found something?" "I think so." "Then come in." And as the glass doors opened to a space filled with light, quiet, and the hum of something that felt strangely like trust, Delia realized this wasn't just coffee anymore. It was the start of something real. Lucas's office was nothing like Delia expected. No flashy art, no wall of awards, no oversized desk meant to separate him from the world. Just a long window overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains, a pair of mismatched chairs, and a dark wood table scattered with paper and ceramic mugs. She stood in the doorway, feeling out of place in her thrifted cardigan and Target flats. He looked up from his laptop, expression softening the second he saw her. "You made it." "Barely," she said. "The elevators in this place feel like they're auditioning for NASA." He smiled. "They do overcompensate." She stepped inside the door, closing gently behind her. Lucas motioned to the chair across from him. "Coffee." She nodded, and he poured from a thermos into a second mug. No assistance. No waiting. "Thanks," she said, wrapping her hands around the warmth. He waited until she took a sip before speaking again. "You found something?" "I found a few things," she corrected. "I don't know what it means yet, but it's off. The vendors, the dates, the totals. It's like someone's testing the limits of the system in small, calculated steps." Lucas leaned back in his chair, tapping one finger against the desk. "That's what I suspected," he said quietly. Delia frowned. "You knew I had a feeling. I've been watching the numbers from a distance, but when you're the face of a company, people stop showing you the details." She studied him. "So why me? Why trust a single mom with no badge, no degree in finance, no office access? Because you notice what others miss?" he said, cutting in gently. "You're sharp, and not on someone's payroll." She flushed. He set his coffee down. "Look, Delia, I'm not trying to drag you into something messy, but I think something is happening inside the company, something under the radar. Quiet theft. And the more eyes I bring in officially, the more people start hiding things. So what now? I want you to keep looking. From home, no login needed. I'll send files through the encrypted system." She hesitated. "Is that even allowed?" He gave her a dry smile. "Probably not, but protecting people rarely is." A beat of silence. "Who do you think's behind it?" she asked. Lucas exhaled slowly. "If I had to guess, Rick Delaney. CFO. Polished. Precise. Knows how to bury things. And you can't just fire him not without proof. The board would demand a full audit, and if he sees that coming, he'll cover his tracks." Delia's fingers tightened around the mug. She didn't like playing detective, but she did like the feeling that she wasn't invisible anymore. Lucas leaned forward slightly, voice quieter now. "Does this scare you?" She didn't answer right away. "A little," she admitted, "but not in the way you think. How then? I'm not scared of what I might find. I'm scared of what it means if I don't do anything about it." He nodded slowly, gaze steady on hers. "I get that." Another pause. The quiet kind, not awkward, just full of thoughts. Then Lucas stood and walked to the window. "The last few years have felt like I'm running a machine I can't touch anymore," he said. "The company grew faster than I planned, and somewhere in the middle of all that, good people got buried." He looked back at her. "I don't want to lose sight of the reason I built this in the first place." Delia stood too, walking over to join him. And what was that? Lucas's answer was almost a whisper. "To help people live longer, without forgetting why they want to." Her heart caught in her throat. Because she could hear it beneath the control, the calm. He wasn't just tired. He was lonely. So was she. And somehow, in this quiet office with mountains stretching behind glass and secrets tucked inside spreadsheets, it felt like that mattered. She spoke without overthinking it. "Okay, I'll keep looking." His eyes warmed. "You sure know," she said, "but I'll do it anyway." He smiled. "Just a little." "Good." As they stood there, a light knock interrupted the moment. The door opened and a woman stepped in. Stylish, efficient mid-50s with an energy that said she ran the world behind the scenes. "Lucas, you're due downstairs in." She stopped, eyes flicking to Delia. "Oh, I didn't know you had company." Lucas cleared his throat. "Delia, this is Marcia Dole, my chief of staff. Marcia, this is Delia Monroe." Marcia's eyes narrowed slightly, not rude, but assessing. She nodded once. "Nice to meet you," she said carefully. "Are you shadowing someone?" Delia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lucas stepped in. "She's helping me on a discrete data review. Vendor analysis." Marcia didn't flinch, but Delia caught at the smallest twitch of her jaw. "I see," Marcia said. "Well, if you need anything, I'm sure you'll ask." She gave Delia a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then turned and left. Delia raised an eyebrow. "She hates me." "She doesn't hate you," Lucas said. "She just doesn't trust new people easily, especially ones she didn't vet." "That's fair." He looked at her. "Don't take it personally." "I don't," Delia said. "But I'm not naive either." He smiled, more genuine now. "Good." As she left his office a few minutes later, walking back through the gleaming halls and past curious stairs, Delia felt something twist in her chest. She was in a world she didn't belong to. But for the first time, she wasn't just surviving it, she was shaping it, one spreadsheet at a time. And something told her this was only the beginning. The first encrypted email came 2 hours after Delia left Lucas's office. Subject line Phase 1. Quiet eyes. No signature, no fancy logo. Just a link to a private portal and a single sentence typed beneath it. Your perspective matters more than you know. Delia clicked in cautiously. The files were cleaner than last time, organized by department invoice size and authorization level. No explanations. Just raw data waiting for someone to make sense of it. She worked late that night. Micah was down early, worn out from teething. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fridge and the tapping of her fingers on the keyboard. She felt different now. Not just like someone Lucas had helped, but like someone he trusted. Someone who had earned a sliver of space in a world that never felt built for people like her. But with that came something new. Pressure, responsibility, and an uneasiness she couldn't quite name. The next morning her phone buzzed as she poured formula into a bottle. "Lucas, can I send a driver for you Friday? There's a charity event. It's not my thing, but I have to show up. I'd rather not do it alone." Delia stared at the message. Charity event. Lucas Carver. Not alone. Her mind flipped through a dozen reasons to say no. She didn't have the clothes. She didn't do events. She didn't belong in a room full of donors and CEOs and foundation heads who wore their money like skin. But the message didn't feel like a flex. It felt like a door. like every other invitation he'd given her so far. And still, her hands shook a little. She typed Delia. "You sure that's a good idea? I'm not exactly red carpet ready," he replied a moment later. "Lucas, I don't want red carpet. I want real." She read it twice. Then again. And something in her chest caved. "Delia, I'll think about it. Lucas, I'll have something delivered. Just in case. No pressure." She closed the phone and let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Jenna showed up that afternoon with coffee and questions. "All right," she said, plopping onto the couch. "Why do you look like someone just asked you to dance at the ball?" Delia groaned. "Lucas invited me to a charity gala." Jenna choked on her latte. "A what? Black tie." "Friday." "And you said no, right? I said I'd think about it." Jenna narrowed her eyes. "Delia. I know. You hate events. I know. You don't even own a bra without visible elastic. I know, Jenna." Jenna leaned in her voice, softening. "Then why are you thinking about it?" Delia hesitated, then looked at her sister, honestly. "Because I don't want to go back to the version of me that would have said no just to stay safe." Jenna blinked, then let out a quiet sigh. "Well," she said, "let me know what time the fairy godmother's coming." The godmother turned out to be a woman named Ava, tall, with short platinum hair, and a wardrobe that probably cost more than Delia's rent. But she was kind, efficient, no fuss. "I've styled worse," Ava said brightly as she stepped into Delia's apartment Friday morning. Comforting. Delia deadpanned. By 6 p.m., Delia stood in front of her tiny hallway mirror, breath caught in her throat. The dress was navy long and hugged in all the right places without trying too hard. Simple makeup, soft waves in her hair, clean lines, no sparkle, no drama, just her, but elevated. Jenna blinked when she saw her. "Holy crap, you're a movie trailer." Delia rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed pink. The driver arrived at 6:30 sharp. Black car, tinted windows. She hesitated only once before stepping inside. The venue was an old renovated opera house glowing with gold trim and candlelight. Waiters drifted with trays. Laughter echoed. And every man looked like they were running for office. But Lucas was at the top of the steps, waiting. Dark suit, no tie, hair slightly tousled, and the kind of look that stopped her breath. "You came," he said. She swallowed. "You sound surprised." "I'm not, just relieved." He offered his arm. She took it. Inside, the air shifted, heads turned, murmurs rose and fell. She caught the look from two women near the champagne tower, half curiosity, half judgment. Lucas noticed. He leaned in. "You okay?" "Not yet," she whispered. "But maybe soon." He smiled at that. Introductions followed, some polite, some stiff. Delia smiled through it, nodding when needed, sipping water from a crystal glass she was afraid to hold too tightly. And then Marcia appeared. "Delia," she said, lips pursed. "We haven't officially met. We did, actually. Briefly. In Lucas's office." "Ah." Marcia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes. The data project?" Delia held her gaze. "That's right." Lucas stepped in. "Marcia's our fiercest gatekeeper." "And with good reason," Marcia added. "Especially with what's at stake." Delia didn't blink. "Then I hope I'm proving worth the risk." A flicker passed through Marcia's expression, surprise, maybe even respect. "We'll see," she said, then walked off. Delia let out a breath. Lucas chuckled beside her. "You just earned points. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone." A string quartet began to play. Lights dimmed. Someone took the stage for a speech Delia barely heard. Because beside her, Lucas leaned in again, his voice lower this time. You belong here. She looked at him. Really looked. I want to, she whispered. And she meant it. Every word. Even if the room didn't agree. Even if her fear still hummed under the surface. She wanted this moment. And somehow she wanted him in it. Delia hadn't stopped thinking about that night. Not the champagne or the string quartet or the weight of all those eyes on her, but his voice in the darkened room. Low, steady, warm, with something that felt like belief. You belong here. It echoed louder than the applause, lingered longer than the silk on her skin. She didn't know how to hold that kind of sentence. So she held it quietly. Alone. Let it live in the pauses of her day between Micah's naps, in the silence of her tiny kitchen, in the breath just before she opened another spreadsheet. But as much as it stayed with her, it also complicated things. Because belonging was dangerous. It made you want more, and more was never safe. By Tuesday, the data Lucas sent shifted from vendor reports to internal communication logs. Tighter patterns, tighter access. One name kept showing up again and again, Rick Delaney, CFO, controlled, clean on paper. But the emails were clipped overly formal, oddly timed. Delia compiled a short report and sent it through the encrypted channel. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed. Lucas? That was sharp. Want to talk it through over lunch? Delia lunch where Lucas? My place. I promise I can cook. Sort of. She stared at the message, heart thudding. Not coffee, not the office. His place. She typed back, thumb hovering over the screen. Delia, you know I'm not exactly your usual company, right? His response came a moment later. Lucas, that's the point. She said yes. He sent a car. The house wasn't what she imagined. Tucked just outside Asheville, it sat at the edge of a hill, glass and cedar, blending into the trees like it belonged there. No gate, no sprawling driveway, just quiet. Intentional. Barely visible from the road. She stepped out of the car, slowly clutching her bag, suddenly hyper-aware of the scuff on her left boot. The door opened before she knocked. Lucas stood there in jeans and a soft gray Henley. No shoes, a tea towel over one shoulder. Hey, he said, voice lighter than usual. Hey, she echoed, stepping inside. The house was open, airy, high ceilings and sunlight slanting across the floors. Books everywhere, no marble, no chandeliers, just stories, framed photos, laughter trapped in wood. It didn't smell like money. It smelled like cinnamon and fresh air, and something warm baking in the oven. Delia turned slowly, taking it all in. This doesn't feel like a billionaire's house, Good Lucas said. It's not supposed to. He walked past her into the kitchen where a cast-iron skillet was doing something complicated with rosemary. I can't promise it's gourmet, he said, but I haven't poisoned anyone yet. Delia grinned. That's a low-bar carver. He laughed. That's what makes it achievable. They ate on the back deck overlooking the mountains. No servers, no noise, just birds and wind and the hum of something easy. Delia watched him carefully. He wasn't performing, not trying to impress, just present. She hadn't had a meal like that in years, not rushed, not survival, just real. So he said, pushing his plate aside, Your instincts about Rick are dead on. She blinked. Wait. Really? Lucas nodded. I ran the patterns through an independent firm I trust. Quietly. They flagged similar anomalies. Vendor shell accounts, ghost invoices. He's moving small amounts consistently over time, building a buffer or a parachute. Her pulse quickened. Does the board know? Not yet. What happens when they do? Lucas looked at her, then exhaled. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She nodded, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why haven't you shut it all down yet? The whole operation. Lucas didn't answer right away. Then he said, quietly, because I built it with the hope it could outlive me, not just as a company but as an idea. If I destroy it to save it, then it never was what I believed it could be. Delia stared at him. The air shifted between them softer now. Closer. He met her gaze. Do you believe in second chances? Yes, she said. But only if you earn them. He nodded once, slowly, then stood. Come on, there's something I want to show you. She followed him down a hallway and into a room she hadn't expected a nursery. Soft blues, a mobile spinning lazily, a framed drawing on the wall that said, "You are safe here." Delia's breath caught. You had a child, she whispered. No, Lucas said. My sister did. This was for her. Delia turned toward him. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't closed off either. She died, she asked gently. He nodded. 6 years ago. Heart failure, complications no one caught in time. I was out of the country. A deal I thought was life-changing. It was, just not the way I meant. Delia's heart ached for him. And suddenly the man who had once seemed like a distant figure behind glass walls, he was just a brother who hadn't made it home in time. She stepped closer. Lucas. I didn't bring you here to make you feel sorry for me, he said quickly. I wanted you to know where my head is. Why I care. Why I don't just throw money at problems. She nodded, eyes stinging. Thank you for showing me. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment neither of them said a word. Then Micah's picture flashed into her mind. His sleepy eyes, his small hand wrapped around hers. She turned suddenly, overwhelmed. I should go. Lucas didn't stop her. He just walked her to the door. But before she stepped out, he asked softly, Will you come back? Delia turned to him, searching his face. I don't know where this is going, she said. I don't either, he replied. But it doesn't feel wrong. No, she whispered. It doesn't. And then without planning it, she reached up and touched his cheek. Just a second. Warm, real, honest. Then she walked away before she could change her mind. Or worse, stay. Delia sat at her kitchen table long after Micah had gone to sleep, the baby monitor humming beside her like soft static. The laptop screen glowed faintly, reflecting in her tired eyes as she scrolled through a new folder Lucas had sent just hours earlier. Q3 consolidated logs, restricted view, restricted. It made her stomach twist a little, not from fear, from the weight of being trusted. She sipped cold TIs, scanning invoice numbers, payment dates, and vendor accounts. Her fingers moved with more certainty now, like the old muscle memory from her lab days was coming back, reading between the lines, spotting patterns others missed. She paused on one name, Brontech Solutions. It showed up in multiple departments, small transactions, never more than a few thousand. But the same payment ID kept repeating, tucked in different corners as if it were hiding in plain sight. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Lucas, still awake. She stared at it. Delia Brontech. It's buried in facilities and admin. Same ID, multiple shells. The reply came fast. Lucas, that's what I was hoping you'd see. No one on the internal audit caught it. Delia. Why not? It's right there if you line them up. Lucas. Because they didn't want to find it. She sat back, heart racing, not just because she'd found something, but because of what it meant. It wasn't a glitch. It was a choice. Lucas, can I call you Delia? Hesitated, then typed Delia Micah's sleeping. Just text for now. A pause. Then Lucas. This is getting deeper than I thought. Brontech is tied to a private consulting group Rick used at a past company, one that folded just before he joined mine. Delia, so he's paying himself, through a fake vendor. Lucas, that's what it looks like. We're talking millions across a year. Quiet, clean. If you hadn't found the overlap, I'd still be in the dark. Delia stared at the screen, feeling her heart thud harder. Delia. So what now, Lucas? Now we keep this between us. Until I'm sure. You okay with that? She didn't answer right away. She thought about Micah's tiny socks hanging on the radiator, about the cold stares at that gala, about the look in Lucas's eyes when he showed her the nursery, how it wasn't just grief. It was guilt. Delia, I'm in. She closed the laptop slowly, the air around her too still. Her world had shifted again, and she had no idea what the cost might be. The next morning, Jenna eyed her across the table. You're doing that thing. What thing? The thing where your brain is 2 miles away, and you pretend like everything's fine. Delia cracked a smile. Maybe because everything is fine. Jenna narrowed her eyes. You've got that calm before the storm vibe, like right before a test or a breakup. Nothing's breaking, Delia said softly. Just changing. Jenna waited, then leaned in. You like him? Delia blinked. Who, Lucas? Don't play dumb. I've seen the way your whole face changes when you get a message from him. Delia tried to laugh it off, but Jenna didn't let it go. Is he safe? Jenna asked, suddenly serious. I mean, emotionally. Is he the kind of man who builds or just the kind who passes through? Delia looked at her sister. Really looked. I don't know yet, she said. But I think he wants to be better than he's been. Jenna nodded slowly. Then let him prove it. But don't carry all of it alone, okay? That night, Delia found herself staring at an email she'd been avoiding. It was from Marcia. Subject: Lucas's data project. Delia hovered before opening it. Delia, I assume you're aware this data project has moved into sensitive territory. Lucas values your insights, but I need to know what your intentions are, what exactly you're looking for. Please be clear. M. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't friendly either. Delia replied simply, Marcia, I'm looking for the same thing you are. The truth. Delia. No fluff, no over-explaining, just clarity. She hit send before she could overthink it. The next afternoon, Lucas asked to meet again, this time at a quiet cafe off a side street in downtown Asheville. It was the kind of place with chipped mugs and a chalkboard menu where no one wore a suit and everyone smelled like espresso. He was already there when she arrived, a booth tucked in the back, steam curling from his cup. Hi, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, she replied. You, he smiled. Same. They sat in silence for a moment, both watching each other like they were trying to memorize this strange space they were building between them. Finally, Lucas spoke. I have a proposal. Her stomach tightened. Not that kind, he added, quickly smiling. I mean work, a formal role, remote, flexible hours, no public listing, just a contract and a very generous stipend. Delia blinked. You want to hire me? I want you to have protection, he said. And authority. You've done more in 3 weeks than my internal compliance team has in 6 months. She hesitated. Would this make me a threat? Lucas looked at her, something in his eyes sharpening. You already are, he said quietly. To the right, people. Delia stared at the coffee between them, then lifted her eyes. Okay, I'll do it. His smile was soft, proud, but then he added, There's something else. What Marcia's digging. Not at you, but around you. She's trying to figure out how much you know and why I'm trusting you. Delia's pulse quickened. She thinks I'm in over my head, Lucas said, and maybe I am. But I also know when something feels right. And this feels right. She looked at him, voice low. Don't lose your company over a hunch. Lucas leaned closer. I'd rather lose it doing the right thing than keep it by pretending I don't see what's happening. A pause. Then Delia whispered, You really believe in me? I believe in what we're doing, he said. And I believe in you, yes? Outside, the wind picked up scattering leaves across the sidewalk. Delia sat back. Suddenly, for the first time in years, she wasn't bracing for impact. She was bracing for flight. Delia stepped into the sleek, glass-walled building with her name on a temporary badge and a lanyard that felt heavier than it should. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile, but her eyes flicked over Delia's thrifted blazer with a flash of curiosity or judgment. Maybe both. She smoothed her hands down her sides and took a breath. She wasn't here to fit in. She was here to see everything. Lucas had arranged a private workspace on the 17th floor. Not an office, just a corner with a desk, a terminal, and limited access to the internal server. Enough to not raise suspicion, but enough to find what mattered. Marcia passed by as Delia was logging in, her stride sharp, controlled. New workspace, she asked, pausing. Delia nodded. Just for the week. Marcia's tone stayed even. Lucas didn't mention it. Delia looked up. He said it was a test run. Marcia studied her for a beat too long, then smiled. Well, we'll see what you find. Then she was gone. Delia exhaled. The tension was different now, not just in her chest, but all around her. Like the walls themselves knew something was brewing. Lucas had warned her this chapter will be the one where people start choosing sides. By noon, she'd flagged another irregularity and overlap between two internal supply requests marked for urgent medical equipment that were rerouted and never invoiced properly. She copied the file to the encrypted folder and typed a note. 2 discrepancies. Same destination? Different departments? Feels like misdirection, Lucas replied instantly. That's the 3rd this week. It's moving faster now. He's probably trying to cash out before anyone gets close. Delia sat back. The room suddenly felt too quiet. A knock on the glass made her jump. It was Ava. Stylish as ever, but today her eyes held something softer. I heard you were here, Ava said, stepping inside. Mind if I sit? Delia shook her head. Not at all. Ava lowered herself into the chair across from her, crossing one leg over the other. I wasn't sure about you, she said. Still not entirely sure. But I know Lucas better than almost anyone. And I haven't seen him this in a long time. Delia tilted her head. What do you mean, this, open? Invested? Alive? A pause passed between them. I don't know what your story is, Ava continued. But I do know you didn't just stumble into this. And Lucas doesn't ask for help unless he means it. Delia looked at her hands. I didn't plan any of this. Sometimes the best stories start that way. Before she left, Ava added one more thing. If you need someone other than Lucas, I'm around. It was the closest thing to approval Delia had received all week. She nodded. Thank you. That evening, Lucas sent a message with no files attached. Lucas, meet me. Usual cafe. 30 minutes. She left without changing clothes, without second-guessing. When she arrived, he was already there. Jacket off, sleeves rolled, a second cup waiting for her. You look tired, he said gently. I am. But I can't stop, she admitted. He nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. I talked to a board member today, he said. One I trust. Gave them just enough to keep them curious, not enough to make a move. We're on a clock now. How long do we have? Not long. Maybe days. Delia stirred her coffee absently. I'm not scared of what we're doing, she said. But I am scared of what happens if we stop too soon. Lucas reached across the table. Just a touch, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. You're not alone in this. The cafe lights flickered slightly. A storm was moving in outside, thunder far off, low and slow. It matched the feeling in her chest. She leaned in, voice low. There's something I haven't told you." He stayed still, listening. "The first day we met, when you sent the money, when I thought it was just a fluke, I almost didn't take it. I thought it had to be a mistake." "It was," he said softly. She smiled. "Yeah, but it was the kind of mistake that saved me." Lucas looked at her, then really looked. "What if we both needed saving?" he asked. Delia didn't answer, because she didn't know if she was ready to believe that yet, but her silence said more than words could. As they stepped outside, the first drops of rain hit the pavement. Soft, unapologetic. Lucas held the door for her, then paused as the wind picked up. "Let me drive you," he said. She shook her head. "I like the walk. Helps me think." He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "What's this?" she asked, taking it. "Just open it later." She tucked it into her coat without looking. Their eyes held a beat longer than usual. Then she turned and walked away into the rain. At home with Micah asleep and her hair still damp, she finally unfolded the note. It wasn't typed. It was written in clean, steady handwriting. "Some things begin with accidents. Some begin with choices. I think this might be both." Her fingers trembled slightly. She folded it again, held it to her chest. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for life to start. She felt like it already had. It was almost midnight when Delia's phone rang. She was half asleep on the couch, her laptop still open beside her, a spreadsheet glowing faintly in the dark. Micah had just settled into a deeper sleep. Rain whispered against the windows. Everything felt still until it didn't. Lucas's name lit up the screen. Her heart skipped. She answered quickly, voice groggy. "Lucas." "I'm sorry to call this late." His voice wasn't calm. She sat up. "What happened?" There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "Rick knows." Everything in her body went cold. Delia stood, one hand bracing the edge of the table. "Knows what exactly he confronted me tonight. Subtle, but it was there. Said he had concerns about my new consulting hire. Mentioned Brontech by name. That was no coincidence." Delia's throat tightened. "He's bluffing. He's not. Someone tipped him off. Someone in our circle." She paced the room, heart pounding. Does Marcia know she's too controlled? If she had proof, I'd already be sitting in a board meeting? Delia's mind raced. "So what do we do?" Lucas hesitated. "We go all in." A quiet shiver ran through her. "What does that mean?" "It means you keep doing what you're doing, but faster. I'll give you deeper access. You'll need to find the full picture. Timelines, transfers, names. Enough to force the board to act." Her voice wavered. "Lucas, if we're wrong, we're not." He was firm, unshaking, but she could hear the strain in it. She lowered her voice. "And if we don't move fast enough, then Rick makes the first strike. And when he does, he'll make sure you and I are standing in the blast radius." Delia closed her eyes for a moment, tried to breathe. When she spoke again, it was soft. "Then give me the access. I'll send the credentials tonight." "Okay." "Delia, yeah." He paused. The air between them shifted. "I hate that I pulled you into this." She sat down slowly, voice breaking just a little. "You didn't." I walked in. After they hung up, the silence was unbearable. She opened her inbox. The file was already there. Confidential Tier 3 access. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. One click, and she'd be inside the system most employees never saw. The vault. She clicked. The flood of data nearly swallowed her. Dozens of vendors, hundreds of transactions, patterns tangled in patterns. It was too clean, and that was the problem. She worked until 3:17 a.m., stopping only when her screen blurred. But she found something. A holding company in Nevada. Empty shell. 5 separate deposits. Same dollar amount rounded to the cent, each from different internal departments, all under Rick's authorizations. She flagged them, encrypted them, and attached a time-stamped trail. Then she emailed Lucas 2 words. Got him. Sleep didn't come. Morning brought a knock at her door. Jenna stood on the other side with coffee and 2 blueberry muffins. I had a dream you were in danger, she said without smiling. Delia blinked. What Jenna walked in without waiting for an invitation. You were standing in front of a fire holding Micah and everything was collapsing, but you didn't run. Delia tried to smile, but it didn't land. You okay, Jenna asked, searching her face. Delia nodded too quickly. Jenna didn't press, just handed her the coffee. I don't know what's going on, she said. But whatever it is, don't wait too long to tell me. I'm here. Delia didn't cry. Not then. But after Jenna left, she sat beside Micah's crib and watched him sleep, brushing a hand across his hair, whispering words she hadn't said aloud in years. I'm trying to build something for you. I don't know if I'll get it right, but I swear I'm trying. Her phone buzzed again. Lucas' board meeting moved to Monday. Rick's called a private session. Delia, he's moving. Lucas, so are we. I'll protect you. No matter what. She stared at the message for a long time, then replied, Delia, just make sure you protect yourself too. The rest of the weekend passed in fragments. She and Lucas traded updates through encrypted texts. He arranged for outside counsel. She sorted every detail into files with precision and purpose. On Sunday night, he called again. Tomorrow's it, he said. If they believe the evidence, Rick's gone. If they don't, we'll be. Silence. Then he added, You were never supposed to carry this weight. Delia leaned against the wall, eyes burning. I carried more when I had nothing. At least now, I have something worth the weight. Lucas's voice broke. Just a little. You're extraordinary. She laughed softly. Tell me that when we win. He didn't reply. Not right away. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, I will. That night she folded the slip of paper he'd given her again. Read it one more time. Some things begin with accidents. Some begin with choices. I think this might be both. And for the first time since it all began, Delia felt it, that fragile, terrifying thing. Hope. Chapter 11 was the turning point. And tomorrow would change everything. Delia stood in front of her mirror longer than usual that morning. She wasn't dressed in power, no shoulder pads, no sharp lines, just a navy blouse that didn't wrinkle and slacks she'd bought second-hand, but tailored just right. Clean. Uncomplicated. Honest. She tied her hair back low and simple, not to impress, to show she had nothing to hide. Micah stirred in his crib as she fastened her watch. She knelt beside him, brushing her fingers across his cheek. He was warm, his little hands opening and closing in sleep. I'll be back before dinner, she whispered. And when I am, things will be different. He didn't stir, but something in her did. She met Lucas in the lobby of Carver and Holt at 9:04 a.m. sharp. He wore a charcoal suit that looked quiet but expensive, and when he turned to her, his expression was unreadable, but his eyes lingered longer than they should have in a morning like this. You ready? He asked. No, she said, but let's do it anyway. The boardroom sat high in the building glass walls overlooking downtown Asheville, where clouds hung low like waiting hands. 11 seats lined the table, 8 of them filled. Ava sat near the far-end phone, face down, eyes sharp. Marcia was already speaking in a measured tone. And I believe we all agree that the recent audits deserve a closer look, she was saying. But it's also important to understand who is directing the focus. Lucas and Delia entered mid-sentence. The room shifted. Marcia's gaze flicked toward them, but her expression stayed even. "Ah. Good," she said. "We're all here." Lucas gestured for Delia to sit beside him. No introductions, no small talk. The air was too tight. Chairman Whitaker, a man in his 60s with deep-set eyes and a voice like sandpaper, cleared his throat. "I understand there's been movement on a few irregularities," he said. "Mr. Carver, you requested this emergency meeting. Let's get to the point." Lucas leaned forward, resting his hands flat on the table. 3 weeks ago, I received a request to investigate vendor discrepancies across 3 departments. What we found was larger than I expected, and far more serious. He nodded at Delia. She opened her folder. Heart steady. Voice clear. In the last year, she began, over $2 million have been routed through a series of shell vendors connected by shared tax IDs, off-site billing addresses, and identical routing numbers. All traced back to a Nevada-based holding company tied directly to our current CFO, Richard Delaney. A few board members shifted in their seats. Rick, seated across from her, tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "That's a bold accusation," he said smoothly. Delia didn't blink. "It's not an accusation. It's a paper trail, verified by an independent firm, logged and time-stamped." She slid packets across the table. Silence followed as pages flipped. Lucas broke it. This wasn't just missed by oversight, it was deliberately hidden. Using internal authorizations, Rick rerouted funds across unrelated projects, each small enough to avoid flagging. But collectively, it's embezzlement. Rick laughed dryly. "Or a deeply flawed interpretation by someone who isn't a trained auditor." "She's not just an auditor," Lucas said, voice low. "She's the reason we're sitting here." Rick turned toward Delia now. "And who exactly are you?" The room fell still. Delia held his gaze. Someone who had nothing, who had to choose between formula or rent, and then by mistake asked the wrong man for help and found the right one instead. Her voice tightened. "You built your kingdom on stealing from people who trusted you. I've spent every night for the past month untangling your lies. I know exactly who I am." "Do you?" Rick looked away, jaw tightening. Marcia leaned forward, now carefully measured. "Even with all this," she said, "this isn't a criminal court. This is a company. We can't destroy reputations on internal findings." Lucas shook his head. "This isn't about reputation. It's about integrity. And we have enough here to freeze Rick's accounts and begin formal action." Chairman Whitaker sighed, then nodded. "I'll need time to review," he said. "But I'm inclined to agree. Effective immediately, Rick. Your access is suspended pending investigation. You'll be escorted out and placed on administrative leave." Rick stood slowly, saying nothing. His face was unreadable, but his eyes met Delia's for one long second before he turned and walked out. The room exhaled. Ava was the first to speak. "Well, that was less blood than I expected." Delia almost laughed, but her hands were still shaking beneath the table. Marcia closed her folder. "There'll be fallout. I hope you're both ready for that." Lucas stood adjusting his cuffs. "We're ready." The meeting ended, but Lucas and Delia lingered in the hallway after the others left. "You were brilliant," he said quietly. "I didn't breathe the whole time. You held your ground." She looked up at him. "What happens now?" He paused. "Now we rebuild." They stepped into the elevator. Neither spoke as it descended. But just before the doors opened, Lucas said almost too softly, "I meant what I said. You weren't supposed to carry this, but I'm glad you did." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't carry it alone." As they walked outside into the fading light of afternoon, Delia's phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. Micah just said, "Mama," while pointing at the news. Are you famous now? She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. Maybe not famous, but seen. Really seen for the first time in a long time. And maybe that was enough. It had only been 3 days since the board meeting, but the office felt like a different world. Delia walked into Carver and Holt with a new badge clipped to her lapel. Not temporary, not borrowed. Her name was printed on it in clean, bold letters. Below it, her new title, Special Strategic Advisor. People greeted her differently now. A nod here, a smile there. Some curious, some cautious. A few unsure if they should congratulate her or keep their distance. She didn't blame them. She didn't feel like she belonged either. Not quite. Not yet. The elevator chimed at the executive floor, and as the doors opened, she saw Marcia standing near the windows, arms folded. Her reflection in the glass seemed more still than she actually was. "You've made quite the entrance," Marcia said, turning. Delia offered a cautious smile. "I didn't mean to. I just followed the evidence." Marcia stepped closer. "That's exactly what makes people nervous." Delia swallowed but held her ground. "Are you one of them?" Marcia tilted her head. "I was. But now, I'm watching." Delia didn't flinch. "Then I hope you watch closely." A flicker of something passed through Marcia's expression. Maybe amusement. Maybe respect. She gave a curt nod, then walked away, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Lucas's office door was open. He was on a call, but when he saw her, he waved her in. She took a seat quietly, letting the words on his end wash over her strategies, press timing risk disclosures. This wasn't just cleanup. It was the start of a transformation. He ended the call and looked at her. "You okay?" he asked. Delia let out a breath. "I think I'm starting to be." Lucas leaned back, watching her for a long moment. "You look different." "Because I'm sleeping again," she said, smiling faintly. "That helps," he said, then softer. "But that's not it." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "It's weird, you know. A month ago I was trying to stretch $10. Now I'm... this." Lucas leaned forward. "You're not just this because of what you found. You're this because you saw something no one else did and didn't run from it." Delia shook her head. "I didn't have the luxury of running." He studied her, then said, "Maybe not. But you had every reason to step back. And you didn't." Their eyes met. The air shifted. Then his desk phone rang, breaking it. He didn't answer. "Let it go to voicemail." "You've earned a break," he said. "Come to the cabin this weekend." Delia blinked. "What just a day? You and Micah. It's quiet, peaceful. You could use that?" She hesitated. "Lucas, I can't blur lines. I'm not asking for lines to be blurred. I'm offering space. Rest. Time to just be." Her throat tightened. "Okay," she said quietly. "One day?" He smiled. "That's all I'm asking." The weekend came like a whisper. The cabin was tucked into the trees an hour outside Asheville, wrapped in pine and quiet, the kind of place where the wind sounded like a lullaby and nothing rushed. It wasn't opulent. It wasn't designed to impress. It was simple. Warm. Lived in. Micah took to it, instantly crawling across the wooden floors, pulling himself up on the wide windowsill to look at the birds outside. Lucas sat on the floor with him, building towers out of blocks and pretending to be impressed when Micah knocked them over. Delia stood in the doorway watching them. "You're good with him," she said softly. Lucas glanced up. "I never had siblings. Thought I'd be terrible with kids. You're not." He smiled, then looked back down as Micah squealed with joy. "I didn't realize how loud silence could be until I came here the first time," Lucas said. "It's like your thoughts echo." Delia stepped inside, settling onto the couch. Sometimes I think I'm afraid of silence, she said, because then I have to really hear myself. Lucas looked at her. What do you hear? She paused. Someone who's still not sure she deserves any of this. Lucas got quiet. Then gently I used to feel that way too. She looked at him. I thought success meant I'd finally earned love. That if I built enough, gave enough fixed, enough, I'd be enough. He looked down at his hands. But it turns out, you can't build worth. You have to believe it, and believing it takes time. Delia whispered. And people. Their eyes locked. The moment hung there. Fragile. Raw. But instead of closing the space, Lucas stood. I'll get dinner going, he said. Micah looks like he's ready for 3 plates. She nodded, grateful for the pause. For the way he always knew when not to press. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees, they sat on the back porch, Micah asleep inside, wrapped in a soft blanket in a travel crib. The air smelled like pine and earth. Crickets started their nightly chorus. Lucas passed her a mug of tea. Tell me something I don't know about you. Delia smiled. I used to think the stars had secrets. When I was little, I'd lie on the hood of my mom's car and make up stories for each one. He looked up. You still do that? Not for a while. But lately? I think they might be watching again. Lucas turned toward her. You know what I see when I look at you. She shook her head. Someone who doesn't wait for the stars to give permission. Someone who became her own light. Her eyes shimmered. She looked away. I'm not used to hearing things like that. Well, he said, voice soft, you'd better get used to it. She sipped her tea, warmth spreading in her chest, not from the drink, but from the man sitting beside her. From the way he spoke. From the quiet between them that wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfort. Possibility. The next morning as they packed to leave, Lucas handed her a small envelope. What's this? She asked. Open it when you're ready. She slid it into her bag, heart already racing, but she didn't open it. Not yet, because something told her this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. Something deeper. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for 2 full days before Delia touched it again. It was thin. No name. Just a soft crease along the edge where Lucas had folded it by hand. Every time she passed by it, her eyes lingered, but her fingers never reached for it. Not yet. Not until she knew if the feeling in her chest was real or just gratitude dressed as something else. That morning she dropped Micah off with Jenna, promising she'd be back by dinner. Then she walked into Carver and Holt like she belonged. Not because of the badge, not because of the office with her name newly etched on the frosted glass, but because she had earned it. It had been 5 days since Rick's suspension. 5 days since the entire executive wing seemed to reorient its orbit. Marcia was quieter, Ava more present, and the interns suddenly knew Delia's name. But today, something else hung in the air. Lucas hadn't called. No morning text, no check-in. No, you okay? She told herself it was fine. He was busy. Meetings, cleanup, the board's official investigation had launched and the press was circling. Still, she felt the absence like a phantom touch. Just after 11, Ava walked into her office, holding 2 coffees and a knowing look. You're going to need this, she said, placing one on the desk. And before you ask, yes, I noticed. He's been quieter. No, I don't know why. Delia blinked. I wasn't going to ask. Ava hummed, sitting across from her. You don't have to. You wear it all over your face. Delia wrapped her hands around the cup. I'm not sure what it is between us. Ava sipped her coffee, then tilted her head. That's because you're waiting for him to define it. Don't. Delia looked up. Why not? Because men like Lucas don't move unless they think they're allowed to. And sometimes even when they are, they still don't, because they're scared of what they'll break. Delia's voice softened. He's not the only one scared. Ava smiled. Then tell him, don't wait for a perfect moment. Just say what's real. That night, she opened the envelope. Her fingers were steady, but her breath wasn't. Inside a note. Same handwriting as before. Some moments change us, not because they're loud, but because they're true. I don't want this to end when the work does. Dinner, just us, no date, no time, just a number at the bottom, 7 p.m. And the word Friday. She looked at the clock. It was 6:22. Delia stared at the note heart pounding. No address, no details, but deep in her gut, she knew. There was only one place it could be. She threw on her coat, kissed Micah goodbye, and grabbed her keys. The cabin. By the time she pulled into the long gravel drive, the sun had just dipped below the treetops. Warm light spilled from the front windows. Inside, everything looked still. She stepped onto the porch and paused. The door opened before she knocked. Lucas stood there, sleeves rolled again, no tie, eyes soft but uncertain. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure you meant it. He smiled, slow and careful. I always mean it with you. They didn't say anything else for a moment. Then she stepped inside. Dinner was already set, a small table by the window, 2 plates, candles flickering low. Something roasted. Something warm. It smelled like comfort. They ate mostly in silence at first, sips of wine, forks tapping plates. Finally, Delia broke it. Why didn't you call this week? Lucas looked at her, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Because I didn't want to cloud the moment you were building. You've come into your own. You didn't need me hovering. She set her fork down. Lucas, I didn't ask for you to fix me. I just wanted to know you were there. I was, he said softly. Always. Her voice dipped. Then why did it feel like you were pulling away? He pushed his plate aside, leaned in. Because I've never felt this before. Not like this. Not with someone who doesn't want anything from me, just me. Delia's breath caught. Lucas continued. You came into my life like a wrong number, a mistake, but it was the most honest moment I'd had in years. I was desperate, she whispered. And I was hollow, he replied. But when you showed up asking for $10 for formula, you reminded me what it means to matter to someone beyond what I can give them. Tears welled in her eyes. I never wanted your money, Lucas. I know, he said. That's what scared me. They sat in that moment, letting it settle. Then she reached across the table, her fingers finding his. Let's stop being scared. He didn't answer. He stood, rounded the table, and pulled her gently to her feet. Their hands stayed clasped as he led her to the porch. The night air was cool, the stars sharp and bright above the trees. He looked up, then back at her. I used to think I was destined to be alone. Delia smiled softly. You're not. And I used to believe love only came in chaos. She stepped closer. And now, he whispered, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. I believe it can come quietly. Just like this, their foreheads touched. No kiss, not yet. Just breath shared between 2 people who had walked through fire and still reached for each other in the dark. Inside, Micah stirred in his crib. Delia turned her head slightly, listening. Lucas smiled. Let me check on him. As he slipped away, she looked out over the woods, arms folded around herself. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was choosing. And tomorrow she'd tell him exactly that. The early spring sun poured softly through the windows of the Carver and Holt conference room, painting the floor in long stripes of gold. Delia stood at the head of the table, not as an assistant, not as a stand-in, not as someone barely clinging to a paycheck. She stood as a voice. She took a breath. What we build here next matters more than what we tear down. If we want a company that people trust, it starts with how we treat the truth. A quiet settled across the room. Lucas sat 2 seats down, arms folded, eyes steady on her. He didn't need to speak. He'd already said everything in the weeks leading up to this by letting her lead, by not stepping in to take credit, by trusting her judgment when others hesitated. Marcia nodded once slowly, motioned to approve the updated ethics policy, and to confirm Delia Monroe as permanent director of strategic integrity. A chorus of "aye" followed. Delia blinked hard but kept her composure. They stood. The meeting ended, but her life was just starting. Lucas met her at the hallway near the elevators, a quiet grin tugging at his mouth. "You always knew how to drop a mic," he murmured. Delia laughed softly. "I didn't even know I had one." "Well, you do now." He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then let his hand fall. "You going to celebrate? I don't know how." "Good," he said. "Then we'll invent it together." They didn't kiss, not there, not yet. But the pause lingered long enough to say everything else. That night back at home, Micah toddled across the small living room, gripping a plastic spoon like it was a baton of power. He'd recently learned how to say milk, but still called it mook. Delia poured it into his sippy cup, smiling as he squealed and clapped. "Mook," he shouted, then hugged her leg. She crouched down and wrapped her arms around him. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" He didn't answer, just pressed his cheek against her shoulder and sighed. Jenna arrived shortly after with a slice of homemade lemon cake wrapped in foil. "Thought you might want something sweet," she said. "For your big promotion. Or your movie-worthy life turnaround." Delia rolled her eyes, laughing. "It's not a movie." Jenna raised a brow. "It is if you marry the billionaire." Delia's smile faltered just enough to show the question she hadn't fully faced. "We're still figuring it out. Does he make you feel like more of yourself?" Delia blinked. "Yes." "Then don't wait too long to answer when he asks. Whatever he asks." Later that evening, Delia sat on her small balcony, wrapped in a sweater, the city humming softly below. The stars were faint behind light pollution, but she could still see a few brave ones. She pulled her phone out, opened a new message. She typed, "Thank you for seeing me," when I didn't know how to be seen, then deleted it. Instead, she simply wrote, "Still up." The 3 dots danced for only a moment before his reply came. "Always. Want to come over or should I?" She stared at the screen, heart thudding. Then typed, "Neither. Let's meet where it started." An hour later, she stood outside the 24-hour grocery store, the one where she'd cried in the parking lot where the phone screen blurred as she typed in desperation. Lucas's car pulled in beside her. He got out, no jacket wind tousling his hair. "You remember this place?" she asked. "I remember everything," he said, stepping closer. "I almost didn't hit send," she whispered. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. "What changed your mind? I imagined a world where I stayed silent. And I couldn't bear it." Lucas looked at her like she was the only thing in the universe. "I've waited my whole life for someone who didn't need anything from me. Just wanted me." She reached into her pocket, pulled out the crumpled receipt she'd written on earlier, and handed it to him. He unfolded it. On it, in her handwriting, "Yes." He looked up. "Yes to what? To whatever you were going to ask next," she said, "before you talk yourself out of it." He laughed, quiet, stunned, real. Okay, he said. Then come here. This time there was no hesitation. They kissed, not the explosive kind, not the dramatic fireworks behind the eyes kind, but the kind that felt like safety, like coming home, like something built slowly, brick by brick, with no cracks. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "What are we doing, Delia?" he asked. She smiled, writing a different ending. Weeks later, the headlines faded. Rick resigned quietly, the investigation closed, and the company began its rebuild. Delia's office got a plant she kept alive. Lucas showed up every Wednesday morning with blueberry muffins. And Micah. He pointed at Lucas every time he walked in and shouted, "Mook." Lucas laughed every time and never corrected him. Sometimes the most unexpected stories start with a mistake and end with a life you never knew you could ask for. Delia looked out her window one evening, Micah asleep beside her, and whispered to the quiet room, "Thank you for saying yes." And somewhere in the quiet of that answer, everything finally settled into place.